to let the world know what a wonderful time you've had at this webinar. Well, that's probably enough from me. As I say, Steve's got a lot to get through, and I said to sure you can get through 10 points. Normally we might stop at 6. Can you get through 10 points in the time allotted? He was confident he could. I'm going to hand you over to him now. Ladies and gentlemen, let's wrap up the year with some rich content from Stephen Walsh of City and Guilds Kineo. What are the top trends for learning technology next year? Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Don. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. Thanks a lot for taking a break from your no doubt hectic Christmas shopping. If anyone's actually listening in while standing in a department store queue, I admire your multitasking. Thank you for joining us. I'll try and make it through 10 trends in the next hour or so. And as Don said, it'd be great to get some conversation going. I think to borrow a buzzword, we're very keen to crowdsource additional ideas and what you're doing around these trends. We've got a couple of questions we're going to ask you as we go through. So without further ado, let's crack on. So I was recently actually down with Con and others in Australia, attending a conference down there, and a lady from Deloitte presented and used this phrase, which I've mercilessly stolen here, insights of the new currency. It just really struck me as a good way to express just how important in our industry pulling out of the day-to-day delivery, which we're all obviously focused on, to just think about insights. So they're the currency that we're going to try and trade with you today. Just in case you thought it was Bitcoin, I found out to my horror that Bitcoin is still not acceptable in Dixon's, Argos or Curry's. So in case you're trying to use them this Christmas, you might want to give that a year. So let's see if we can enrich your Christmas season with 10 new trends here. Just a bit of background about how we got here. These trends are sourced from talking to people. We're in a very privileged position at City and Guilds Kineo to have a great set of clients and people who engage with us day to day. And we like every year to just step back working with e-learning age and say, well, let's just reflect on the year. What trends, worries and concerns are on your minds? We talked to these organisations, about 20 more. We asked them those questions and it yielded some great discussions, which we'll summarise for you today. But before I get into what they told us, I want to kick off with a question to you. So as you close out 2014 and look into 2013, rather, look into 2014, what are the 3 words that you would summarise as things that are on your mind? Things that you think you haven't got to yet and you're really keen to get into in 2014, things that are, problems you're going to think about over Christmas. Let's just get some conversation going. So drop your 3 words into the chat room.
And you want these trends in just 3 words? That's
3 words.
Let's be generous. It's Christmas.
I'll take 4.
You can go to 4 if you wish. What are the trends, challenges, and worries that you've got on your mind as we look forward to next year? I mean, there's plenty, and of course, putting forward the learning technologies
coming through
barrier. Putting the conference program together. I've seen some of the thoughts. A lot of interesting stuff coming through already, Steve.
Yeah, a lot of personalisation, a lot of tracking outcomes coming from Owen and Don Vernon as well. Analysis, doing more with that. Compliance still remains high on the list. Of course, we've got to keep delivering to these needs. Tablets, mobile, tin can, social. We're going to be picking up on a lot of this stuff. Yeah. So a lot of these things are becoming true.
Some common themes there, guys. Thank you very much. Keep it coming.
Yeah. Keep it coming. We'll pick them up as we go. Absolutely. Okay. So let's keep an eye on those as we go. But let's get into what we want to cover here. So in doing this, and there's a full report. We'll give you the URL later. A key theme I think that we tried to use to summarise it all was learning at the speed of need. What we've seen most of all is that organisations, learners, teams, they just can't wait anymore. They need the information at their fingertips. They need to be able to use learning to enable performance immediately. There can't be a gap between absorption of information and application of it. So speed of need, I think, is going to be the key theme. And you might argue it's always been that, but more than ever, I think, in 2014. The great thing is, I think there is a great new set of tools to enable us to act and support people with speed. So let's just look at what those are and how we can help people not have to wait around anymore. First key trend that we saw, learning is pervasive. Now, you might well argue it's always been, but I think more than ever, we're recognizing that the 2 tools that we've used in this industry as means of delivery, the course and the learning management system, the tyranny of those as the only means to get learning and to get information are fading away. It's becoming more continuous, more collaborative, and more connected. And for us in L&D departments or providers of learning, the challenge is you can't control it. We don't own the means of production anymore. It's more democratic. It's in the hands of the learners. Someone used the phrase when we were talking to them, we've had the Arab Spring. This is the year, 2014 will be the year of the learner spring, where people actually take more control, source their own content and start creating their own content. And it's great to see Charles on the line, who's really owned and driven this term through 70-20-10, recognizing that the vast majority of learning does not happen in that 10% of formal learning. It happens through social learning, it happens through learning on the job. Others, Dan Pontefract has used this 33-33-33. There seems to be 1% lost somewhere there, but that was never my strong point. Whatever ratios you think they're in, it's recognizing that formal LMS-driven course-based learning is going to fade in terms of its primacy as a source of getting information. Quite used, like this graphic again from Dan Pontefract, just looking at the various different mechanisms that are available between formal, informal, and social. And many of these will be familiar with you. They're not new, but they are becoming more prominent in the use within organizations, especially on the informal and social side. Social in particular, seeing more videos, a huge rise in the use of videos that we're seeing within organizations. The cost of production and the ease of access for those has dramatically changed over the last several years. Blogs, web jabs, microblogging, all of these tools available, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about each of them. Now you might argue there's nothing new about that. You know, no one said that e-learning in the LMS was there's always been lots of different ways, whether it's trial and error, sitting beside someone, problem solving, critical thinking, writing and reflecting. That's true. These things have always been here, but the tools and mechanisms to help us deliver these and to consume them have dramatically changed over the last couple of years. So we're seeing the organizations that we've talked to a huge rise in appetite in things like videos. Google Hangouts, great new tool from Google that makes creating webinars and seminars on the fly cheap, easy, and accessible for everybody. Blog articles, shared slides, etc. as well. And social learning hugely expanding to the creation of online networks to allow people to comment and rate. And how you comment and how you rate people becomes incredibly important as a currency as well, which we'll talk about as we go through. So huge change in the number of trends and the number of tools available to help us with that. So I wanted to pause there, as I know there's a lot of tools and trends on there, but just to take the temperature of those in the chat room at the moment, how much are you using these tools within your organizations for parking the formal, but the informal, social aspects? That Don's flipped up the poll there, so it'd be great to see some responses there. Just give that a second for some to come through. Okay, so the majority of people seem to be saying not much at the moment. Not many people saying it's all the time. It's not a common feature.
Shall we end up, I mean, we're broadcasting results, which can always skew it. Shall we end it, or you have things running for a moment?
Why don't we do that?
I think we have the results there. Not much seems to be the overwhelming answer, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose the follow-up question is, does that concern you? Do you want to see more coming in 2014? Because these tools are available. I think the question for learning teams are, if you're not using them, I bet someone else in your organization is using them. You just may not be aware of it, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be controlled essentially, but it's an interesting question for us. What is the role of the core L&D or learning function to curate and encourage use of these tools? But great to see people are at least engaging in them and recognizing that there's more to do there. So a pervasive learning world. If we can agree we're moving into a more pervasive world, that the the other aspect that we think really needs to be examined, and we heard this a lot in the feedback that we got, is assessment. How we assess people needs to change. If we're moving towards a more social, fluid and pervasive model for learning, there's no point in doing all of that and having MOOCs, open experiences, and then closing it off with a 10-question multiple choice test. It's not a reasonable assessment. It's too closed. It's too locked down. It just won't cut it anymore. So we're seeing new models for assessment emerging, and several people talked about Tin Can. Tin Can, the Experience API, obviously moves us in a completely different direction about how we assess. We can assess everything. We can collect experiences that matter, and it becomes more about evidencing your experience in a quantifiable, shareable, and trackable way. And whether that lives within the LMS, whether it just stays in the Learning Record Store or gets published out to some other place, it's decisions for organizations to make, but it doesn't all have to be locked down within the learning management system. I think Tin Can is moving us towards a more honest, more immediate, more fluid way of assessing all of the different experiences, and particularly social experiences as well. So the I did this statement that you use for the API can be I contributed to a blog, LRS's Learning Record Store, where the data from.
Quick question. I mean, Stephen, I appreciate you're cracking on a great pace, which is super. LRS, Learning Record Store. Quick question from Danielle. What is the LRS? Can you quickly just explain that?
So LRS is the place where the data that you gather by expressing an experience through the API is stored. So the format of the statement is I did this. So it might be I completed compliance course, I contributed to a blog. All of that data explaining the stream of things that you've done to evidence competency gets stored in the Learning Record Store. Where that data gets published out then is you've got several options that can reside within the LMS, or you can publish it out to somewhere else as well. So think of it as the holding place for the evidence of everything that you have done that demonstrates your abilities and your competency. So it's a new way of tracking data, and we think a more fluid way than just saying, did you pass the test? What's the result from the piece of e-learning that you've done? It gives you more data. And another example of doing this, and we think a really interesting, exciting one, is open badges. So the open badges movement, founded by the Mozilla Foundation, is another way of evidencing competency. So this is all about, if you were in the Boy Scouts, the Girl Guides, you already know how open badges work. You know, when you earned your badge for photography or camping, you sewed it on your arm, and it was a badge issued that said, you are capable of doing this. You've evidence that you can do this. You can wear it on your sleeve and show us that you know how to do this. Open badges takes exactly that same metaphor and puts it online. So I can earn a badge from an organization. So EasyJet might give me a badge for demonstrating great customer service skills. I can store it in my Mozilla backpack, which is similar to the LRS, the place where I keep all of the evidence of my competency. Then I can choose to display it wherever I want. So I might display it within the learning management system, or I might put it on my Facebook page, or I might put it on my LinkedIn profile. It becomes more portable. The great thing about these is they can expire. So if I earned a badge 2 years ago, the issuer of it might say, well, you haven't done anything with it, or things have changed. You've got to re-earn the badge and show that you've continued to display this competency. And they're also, you can click through them. So some of the open badges, if I have an open badge saying I'm great at JavaScript, it can click through and say, here's some evidence of JavaScript work that I've done. So it's not something like you put on a CV to say I went to college 10 years ago, and no one questions whether you still actually understand what you learned in college. They're current and they're immediate, and they stay fresh. So we're seeing open badges as a great way of making it just far more democratic, because it doesn't have to be from a university or an awarding body. Anyone can issue an open badge. So there'll be a whole new market about which badges are actually prime. Someone asked us in Australia, which would you rather have a badge demonstrating you know how to do animation from? XYZ University of Animation or Pixar? So there'll be, I think, a new change in the dominant currencies of the badges. So I think, Jonathan, you make a great point there. Badges will take a while. It's a big shift. It's a big shift in how we award and recognize competency. But I think it's absolutely the right model to move towards. And employers are getting increasingly interested in doing this and recognizing that a lot of the learning that you get within an organization is portable, and the brand of the organization becomes relevant within the open badges model. So we think it's a really interesting concept to explore, and just ties back to that point I'm making about how assessment changes. A badge or using Tin Can tells you a lot more than the scores on the doors that you get from completing a score-based piece of e-learning. So that's assessment. Moving on a pace here. pervasive world means changes in design and delivery, and I saw coming through the chat stream people asking about BYOD and asking about tablets. We think this is going to be a major trend, and you can argue over the last several years, many of us have been talking about mobile, and it's coming. It's here now. And more organizations that we talk to than not say, we are now serious about this. We are implementing BYOD, bring your own device, and we're allowing learners to access content. If we're going to do that, and if we're doing that to enable them to access their intranet or access their email on mobile devices, you can be absolutely sure they're going to expect to be able to get to their learning on it. So does your LMS work on a mobile device or multi-devices? Does your learning work on multiple devices? If you can't say yes and yes, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have an expectation mismatch with your learners if they can't get to it there. So as workforces become more global, more mobile, and the speed of change through legislation, new products, it's going to mean that technology in multiple devices becomes incredibly important. So again, just to take the temperature here, and you may have been asked this question before, but it's one we've used for a while. How many devices do you use? So tear your hands away from whichever mobile device you're using right now to engage with the poll, and let's just get a sense of how multi-device the audience is. Okay, so quite a few device junkies coming through. 3 seems to be the dominant answer here. Less than 1% of people saying they use one device. That's right, get with the program. So probably close it off whenever you want it done. That's great. So the vast majority of people using 3 or more devices, which is, since if you're like me, you've only got 2 hands, that's incredibly impressive. But yeah, we're incredibly seeing people using multiple devices. Little piece of research from Google, which you may have seen before, but showing the 3 dominant devices that we use. So computers mainly used for work, so as in desktops. So office work help us to be productive and keep us informed. Tablets mainly for entertainment, so 79% of use of those at home, and used for entertainment and browsing. I think this is a really interesting one. Smartphones, they keep us connected. So what I thought was interesting here is 60% of smartphone use is at home. So we use this word mobile learning, but the vast majority of the time I'm using my smartphone slumped on the couch, Googling the actor that I just saw in Game of Thrones. So we think we should break away from this word mobile, because a laptop on a train with a 3G card or Wi-Fi connection, that's a mobile device. A smartphone sitting at home, browsing it for learning, it's a mobile device, but I'm not using it in a mobile way. We think a better phrase to use is multi-device e-learning, so enabling us to move seamlessly from one media surface to another. And a phrase that one respondent in the research uses, we want a Netflix to be able to move from desktop to tablet to mobile and have a continued experience and not feel like we're lurching from one to the next and we have to use an app on one device and use a flash-based version on another, and that none of them talk to each other, and it's a disconnecting experience. Learners are going to expect that learning works just as well as Netflix does. So I wanted to show you just a little example of what we mean by that in practice. This is a piece of work that we've done using an open source framework that we've developed called Adapt. And the whole premise of Adapt is, rather than creating multiple versions of e-learning, so an app for your iOS devices, a different one for Android, a different one for desktop, create one version that works everywhere and knows what device it's on and responds intelligently to it. So I'll just quickly show you what I mean by that. So if I just launch a piece of content here. This is a piece of work we've developed for Logitech. I thought this would be a nice one to show, since if you're anything like me, you're trying to corner the market in PlayStation 4 and Xbox Ones for the few that are around this Christmas. This is all about gaming mice and helping people get the right game for them. So as you can see here, I'm using this full screen on my desktop. One thing that we've discovered in the design work that we've done for multiple devices is that scrolling is okay. This used to be e-learning design. You had to fit it on a 4:3 screen, and the idea of scrolling up and down was considered poor practice in design. Because we're all so used to scrolling up and down on our mobile devices now, scrolling is a perfectly legitimate design tool to use, and we think it actually creates some new grammar in learning design. So the idea of scrolling to tell a narrative or to review becomes a new thing for designers to consider. So this one scrolls up and down quite a lot. I just show you a few seconds of this. I can reading about different gamers, what challenges they have, what kind of gaming peripherals and mice might help them. I'll scroll down here. I've got a customer on the right. I can scroll over her DNA is, what she's looking for, her age, what kind of gaming experience she wants to have, and then the challenge to me over here is find the right mouse for this person and what the price range is, which I will no doubt get completely wrong, which I have, and I get forced to do a little bit of information to help me understand which might be right for this person. So this is an example of it at full desktop. If I just resize this window now, you'll see that as I move it in, it's going to start to resize. So now here it is at the tablet dimension. If I pull it in even further, this is what it looks like when I access it on a smartphone. So it's exactly the same content. It's a SCORM object. It will track exactly the same. As far as your LMS is concerned, nothing has changed. What has changed dramatically for me is the interface and the content experience that I have. So I can now scroll over this content. It's the same content, we're just using different flags in the CSS to present it differently and to optimize it for a smartphone experience. And the content resizes, all the same elements are there. So this is moving towards that Netflix experience of I haven't had to go off and open an app. I haven't had to go to a different learning experience and then worry about which one is getting tracked or how does it know I've moved from one to the next. It's the same piece of content. So it's that idea of it being multi-device and pervasive and working on any service that you might surface that you might want to be on. And we're increasingly seeing that learners want to move in that direction, and organizations are embracing it. And what we've done around that is create it as an open source platform, as I say, collaborating with some other organizations to help move it forward. And I think that idea of continuous collaboration is the right way to develop these tools, not locking them down, not making them proprietary, but opening them up for anyone to develop in. And we'll launch it as an open source framework at Learning Technologies. I'll keep moving forward here. So enabling multi-device learning helps us to move in, I think, an interesting direction. We've used this phrase, higher empathy learning. We talked a lot to Charles Leadbeater, some of you might know. He wrote We Think, great speaker around learning, technology, and education. And he's come up with this system for analyzing experiences in general, but we think there's a good lens on learning experiences in here, from high system to low system, from high empathy to low empathy. Just to explain what I mean by that. So a lot of what we do, and someone mentioned compliance earlier, is high system in learning technology, and it's efficient, it's automated, it doesn't require individuals to intervene or deliver it, but it's not very personal. It's highly efficient, but it doesn't deliver me an experience that speaks to my needs and my issues. And your bog standard compliance e-learning course often falls within that category. Scores well on return on investment and reach of audience, but does it deliver a personal experience? Most of the time it doesn't. Down here in the bottom left, you've got things that are lower empathy and low system, so cheap to produce resources and books, but you're asking learners to create their own context for them. They're not organized, they're not self-directed in any way. On the other side here, you've got experiences that are very, very high empathy. They're very personalized, so coaching or mentoring or one-to-ones that score very well on empathy, but they're hard to scale and are generally expensive to deliver, and there isn't much system around them. Where we think we need to be moving is up into this top right corner, high system and high empathy. So highly organized programs like blended programs, you might even include MOOCs, massive open online courses in here. They're targeted, they create a personal experience, they enable people to contribute and collaborate, and they feel immersive and real and may often have a game-based element to them as well. So this is the direction we think we need to be moving towards, this top right, creating high system and high empathy. And as always, we can look to the web to see where high system and high empathy are playing out and see what we can take from that back into learning. So Amazon and Google are high system, high personalized experiences. You probably know this from browsing Amazon, but it has a huge amount of information about you, whether you think you're giving it to Amazon or not. So it knows which sites you visited, what item you looked at last, what prices you were offered. Amazingly, it knows if you've looked at a website and seen something offered for £100, it knows that, and it may display when you come to Amazon to look at it for £99. So you think it's just chance that it's slightly cheaper on Amazon. It isn't. It's highly personalized, and it knows a huge amount of what you've looked at. So a screenshot of an Amazon page here. It's serving up suggested content based on things that I've browsed and looked at before. I may have bought or I may not have bought them. It's for some reason randomly suggesting one night stay at the Savoy with dinner. That might be for you and me, Don. I'm not quite sure how that got on there, but it's being a highly systemized approach. And I want to contrast this with learning sites and LMSs and what we do. Generally, we're concerned with tracking and recording learning, because we need to report an activity in progress and completion. Commercial sites like Amazon, they're more concerned about activity because they want to be responsive to you. They want to change what's provided based on what you did this time, and it knows next time I'll serve you an ad or an offer or relevant content to you. And I suppose the question is, do we want to deliver more of an LMS experience, or do we want to deliver more of an Amazon experience? And I would contend it's the latter. We want something that's more personalized, more relevant to individuals, and allows people to have more of a contextualized experience. So I would put the Amazon experience in that top right, high system, high empathy quadrant. And I think that's the direction that we ultimately want to move in and make sure that we're providing empathy. Someone asked a question there, David Morley, is this genuine empathy or apparent empathy? So, well, some of it's machine generated, and I wouldn't say Amazon is a great learning experience, but there are things in there that I think we can learn from. How often in our LMS designs are we suggesting relevant content? Are we responding to what people looked at last time and said, you experienced this, you may want to experience that? That does take some intervention, it does take duration, but I think it's worth the investment of it to create more empathy and to create a more individual, personalized experience. Key to delivering empathy within organizations are line managers. This really came out through the research that we did. Line managers still remain absolutely critical to creating an effective, pervasive learning experience. So looking at those higher empathy approaches like coaching, mentoring, feedback, reflection, creating video stories and curation, managers and coaches are absolutely crucial to delivering all of that. And one organization that we spoke to in the research said, yeah, you know, line managers, they are so important to fostering a learning culture and enabling others and supporting the organization, but I don't think we've actually told them that. Sometimes they're the squeezed middle. We focus so much on frontline and we expect managers to deliver it, but are we supporting them enough? So we see one of the key trends next year is make sure that line managers are a key part of your empathy model and that you're supporting them and enabling them to be part of the machinery. Related to that, and this is a direct quote from another organization that we spoke to, is never underestimate the power of learners to help each other and to learn from each other. Within a system where you're allowing learning to be pervasive, where you're bringing in more informal and social learning, and where you're encouraging empathy, the empathy can be from peer to peer, and incredibly important to allow learners and to enable them to create their own networks. So we spoke to one organization where a group of engineers have created a Facebook group to help each other. It's got nothing to do with the L&D team. It's got nothing to do with the learning management system, and that's perfectly fine. And the L&D manager we spoke to was very, very relaxed about it. They're finding ways to communicate with each other. They're using whatever channels work for them. They're curating each other's content. You need to keep an eye on it, make sure that if there's something we can support from the center, that's fine, or if it's going off piste, you can guide it back. But it's allowing people to create their own personal networks as well, and Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+. All these platforms are there, established, free to use. We don't have to invest dollars and pounds in creating alternatives to these. Go with the dominant systems that are already in place and encourage people to form those networks. And this is just a screenshot for a few of them. Social learning, especially using tools like Skype. Lots of organizations that we're speaking to using Skype all the time for chat, but also just for instant screen sharing. You don't need to go through the mechanisms of expensive webinar tools to do these things. Skype or Google Hangout will get you there for free and very quickly. Building on that, so all of these new tools, making it pervasive, someone did flag there is a risk in this that we create chaos. That there are multiple different tools being used across the organization. No one's got a handle on it all. There are competing systems. What do we do about all of this? Do we panic about it? Do we let 1,000 flowers bloom? Do we try and command and control? What is L&D's role in the learner spring? How do we avoid creating informal chaos? Is there really an answer for that yet? I don't think so, but I think three things to think about. You've got to curate, you've got to help people find the resources. One organization that we're speaking to is saying, use whatever tools you want, but here's how we think you should use them. Here's some best practice around forming LinkedIn groups, using Google Hangouts, creating user-generated video content. So you can provide some light guidance around these things. Let the great stuff come to the surface, champion good practice, congratulate and celebrate people who are doing great things here, and connecting individuals, taking a helicopter view and looking at great practice in one part of the organization and helping other parts of the organization bring those on board and learn from the lessons that are in there. So there's a little bit of thriving on chaos, to borrow the well-used phrase, allowing a certain amount of it to happen and making sure that you're steering things generally in the right direction. But it's not for L&D to control. And to be fair to all of the contributors to the research, no one was saying the L&D team is getting left behind here. We're stuck in the training ghetto, to borrow Don's phrase, and we have to command and control this. People are recognizing you've got a supporting role in the middle of it all. A couple of screenshots, a piece of work that we've done for City and Guilds that tries to do this. So this is an industry portal for food and drink to encourage young people into the food and drink industry and allow them to make some choices. There's learning in here, there's an LMS sitting behind it, but that's not really the name of the game here. It's about helping people to exchange content, create content and flag it so that people can find it. It's using ratings to let good content flow to the surface. There's a very strong community element to it. And this is just a video war. This is all curated content, none of it shot specifically for this. All exists on YouTube already. We're just providing a lens on it to allow people to find content. And I think that's a key role for L&D teams, to be intelligent. Curators, editors, and filterers of great content, and to allow people to find the right things for them. So that's just a way, I think, in which you can help to put some order on chaos without being too locked down. But really, I suppose the question is, by creating these tools for searching and finding content, are we all just collectively kidding ourselves? There's a small organization that you might have heard of that's kind of already cornered the market in doing effective search. And I think we have to look at what Google has done and think about how we can emulate what they've done. And I think this is a really important theme that's coming through in what Google's doing and how it influences what we do inside organizations in terms of encouraging pervasive learning. If you search Google regularly, and I'm sure you do, you probably started seeing this with little pictures coming up beside search terms. That's because people have created themselves as authors and have claimed their content. So if you, Steve Rayson, my colleague here, writes a lot about SEO and learning. He's claimed Google authorship against any content that he's written, which means that he features in the search and it connects to him. And we think that this whole theme of authorship will become incredibly important within organizations as well. Who are the real authorities around creating content within your organization? Is it people creating user-generated content, or is it people writing great blogs? This will become a new currency as well, and the power of the informal market to drive things up search terms and show which content is relevant and authoritative will become, we think, a new mechanism for letting great content flow to the surface. And Google cares a lot about this. The new search algorithm cares a lot about who the author is and what the authority of that author is. So the more you demonstrate that you're followed, that your content is respected, that it's shared, this matters an awful lot in how content returns in the search. And you get social signals from social authority as well. So as you can see, this piece of content that Steve wrote has been liked on Facebook 255 times, been shared on LinkedIn 1,000 times. That starts to mean a lot. So others have used this phrase, social signals. It shows how valuable content it is. And that matters to learners, especially when you're in a sea of content with an enormous amount of material available to you. How do we rank relevance? How do we determine what's important? Is it for us centrally within L&D teams to go into the LMS and put something at the top of the page? Well, maybe, but I would argue that that's kind of artificially promoting some content over the other. Relevance, authoritative content is what matters. It's not for us as designers or administrators to decide what's relevant. It's for learners to decide what's relevant, and authority becomes a really new metric for this. One thing I've been just linking back to the earlier point about how do we evidence and assess competency. A couple of organizations that we're working with are asking people to create content, so write a great blog post, synthesizing the learning that you've done, share it and post it. And then we'll see if you really are knowledgeable about this subject, because the best posts will be read the most, shared the most. So this becomes quite an interesting way of measuring competency within the individual and showing that organizations, showing that you're doing the right thing and generating competency around this. I think this is really one to watch next year. I think it's a question to ask, because often in e-learning, when we produce a piece of content, we're doing it in quite an anonymous way. Several subject matter experts have been involved, one or more organizations have been involved in producing it, but does it really have a sense of authorship? Can you look at it and say, that's a really relevant piece of content written by somebody, and allow that to drive up the rankings of it? I think we collectively are a little bit anonymous about how we do things, and as someone mentioned there, it's a great way to deal with the signal to noise ratio, allow great content to float to the top. So I'll encourage you to think about personalization, not just from the learner personalizing their experience, but how do we show that authors have a great personalized experience as well, and their personalities come through really strong in the content that they produce and create. So moving on from that, another trend that we've seen, internal staff development. So this phrase will not skill came up a few times, looking for people who've got great aptitude, attitude and motivation. How do we create great experiences for them? Huge rise in the amount of apprenticeships, which I think has a lot to do with cost of delivery as well, and bringing more people through organizations and developing them internally. And interesting, in the US, where they've kind of turned their backs on the apprenticeship model, it's coming back there as well. So lots of new research saying that the US is ripe for new movements within apprenticeships. Creating a more technology-enabled, higher empathy approach for apprenticeships and qualifications, big area of focus for us at City and Guilds Kineo. We're launching a new service around managed qualifications at Learning Technologies, which will show a little bit more of our thinking around this. But everything that we've said about platform, curation, content and empathy relate just as much to apprenticeships and qualifications as well. Another theme that came through, as it always does every year, is more for less. And I saw it in the chat stream earlier on. People still under the cosh for budget, more now than ever since the financial crisis of 2008. Nothing has changed in this area. People being asked to produce more content, do more, deliver more with less budget. As always, that means we've got to make business cases. We've got to focus on the benefits. We've got to align to the strategy, the things that the organizations care about. So whether that's leadership, compliance, product knowledge, sales, someone used the phrase, follow the money. It's there for scale projects and it's there for strategic projects. The other great thing, I think, about all of these new tools that are available to help us with personalized, pervasive and higher empathy learning is many of them are free or incredibly low cost to adopt and bring into the organization. So using open source tools, you'll know that we're big fans of Moodle and Tatara, the business edition of it, open source tools. Rapid tools like Articulate, many others, not free, but very, very cheap to implement and create content in. Tools like Google Hangouts, Skype, all completely free. So very, very easy to bring into an organization and to experiment with. Of course, there's a human cost to using them. There's a human cost to creating the content that goes with them, but there isn't a massive technology investment. So piloting these things, very quick, very cheap, and very easy. And the other point that came through really strong is if they fail, if it just turns out that there is no take-up in the organization for a particular tool or approach, we stop, we move on to the next thing, and there's no massive investment needed to create a platform that we now feel we have to justify and keep going even though no one wants to use it. So try lots of things, fail early, move on to the next thing. It takes a while for these things to embed, which has just come through in the chat as well, and experimentation becomes really, really important around them. Screenshot piece of work we've done for Sony, so it's using Toto's open source LMS in here, and then content they've developed themselves using Articulate, and they do it in rapid response. So if a need comes through from customers saying, this project is great, but the training on it is not very good, help me. Someone within Sony will either create a short piece of Articulate-based e-learning content, or more often than not, what's happening is people are just creating their own videos and saying, let me show you, I'm an expert on this content, I'll show you how to use it. And we've seen that movement in Dare to Share, the BT project from a few years ago, and lots of organizations using short how-to videos to do this. And the great thing about that is it doesn't have to come from the center. Often that's enthusiast to enthusiast. It's someone who just loves this product or content, creating a piece of e-learning on the fly, uploading it, and as long as the organization believes, yeah, that's a legit explanation of how to use this content, it becomes legitimate, it becomes certified, it becomes part of the learning experience. So back to that point earlier, people learning from each other, people having the means of production to create content to help each other out. So coming on to the final trend, and I suppose this is a summary one, that, looking at everything we've done, so much of this has been driven by the web. Where web technology goes, we think learning has to follow. So we always have to keep an eye on what Google and what the other players are doing and thinking about how do we bring those into a learning technology context. So a couple of things that you've probably already seen. The rise of voice search. Google firmly believes that in a few years' time, you will not type anything into a search engine anymore. That will be old school. You will just talk to your mobile device or your desktop and ask it for information. And if you use iOS devices, I've had a lot of great fun asking Siri increasingly awkward questions to see how he or she deals with it, and you get great response. Voice technology has moved on so much in the last number of years that you really can use it as a legitimate way to search as well. Anyone know what this image is?
Hummingbird.
Hummingbird, great. So Google Hummingbird is the new search algorithm. It's the first change to the Google algorithm in about 10 years. And it's changing how we search. So semantic search, understanding the meaning of what you're asking has become far more important rather than just typing in, unformed words into a search engine. Asking questions. Google cares if you can answer a question, and that's what will drive up authority. If you give the best answer to a question, that's what Google cares about. It also is, if you use Google Instant or Google Now, you'll see that it increasingly predicts what you want as well. So you start typing a question, it gives you the answer to that question. I argue that that's what we should be doing as people who produce content or curate content within organizations. We should be doing more what Hummingbird is doing, answering questions and enable semantic search. Google Now, another fantastic tool. So it provides the information you need before you ask for it. If you're going to a specific city, if you're in Los Angeles and you're meeting with someone, it tells you the weather, travel, traffic. It also will look in your diary and say, you're meeting with Bob Smith. The last time you met with Bob Smith was this day. This is Bob Smith's LinkedIn profile. This is what he's doing. This is his authority on the web. Really acting as a virtual PA for you, serving up contextual information on demand exactly when you need it. So moving us far more into that need of speed in terms of organizing our day, we believe that's more where learning should be going as a tool. So I'll ask you to ponder this question. If Google was building an LMS, and Lord knows they may well be, they've built everything else, what would it be like? So here's a couple of things that we think would feature in a Google-driven LMS. It would know what you want before you ask for it. It would know what you looked for last time. So you completed a piece of compliance learning and you're moving to the next level. Here's some suggested content around that. Of course, it would work on every device. It wouldn't care if you were on a desktop, tablet, or mobile. It would just work. It would enable voice search. It would give you highly personalized results. This is what Google already does. You might think when you search within Google, it's just returning an objective set of search terms. It's not. It's returning terms based on what you looked at last time. It's returning terms based on who you're connected with in Google Plus and what their authority is. So it's far more personalized than we might think. It would care about author authority and social signals. It would return content that's high currency and highly relevant to you. Work across all devices, as you said. It would be immersive and it would adapt to your needs and change over time. And it would assess on demand as well. So it would incorporate open badges. It might prompt you to create new content as well. All of these things, I think, would be in a Google LMS. The point is, hardly any of them are in our LMSs right now or in our learning platforms or in our learning ecosystems, but it's the direction that we think we should be moving towards. And Charles, you're absolutely right. I don't think Google would use the term LMS. They would call it something far better and completely different, and it certainly wouldn't feel like a learning management system. So in summary, before we open up to questions, we think the future is coming. Paraphrase that well-worn phrase from William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. All of these tools exist now. The challenge for us is how do we bring them into the organization? How do we make them normal and part of the overall learning experience? And are we ready to do that? So before I share some thoughts and trends, I'd like to bring another question to you. Based on what you've seen here, things that are on your mind, what is your New Year's resolution in 2014? Using these tools, using these technologies, using these approaches. Let's get some thoughts in the chat room, and the thoughts can be converted into currency, which I'll explain a little bit later on, but just open it up to the room, challenges that people are seeing as they move forward.
I think when Stephen says that thoughts can be converted into currency, he means he'll buy a drink for anybody who gives a really good New Year's resolution. Is that right?
Absolutely. Anyone who'd like to come to Dublin in the next hour, I'll be... the bar is open.
Some good thoughts coming through. I love John's. Do it now. That's just splendidly to the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Ali's talking about user-generated content, and Cedric wants to align with the business needs.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think need of speed, do it now. Absolutely great phrase. Just do it. There's nothing blocking us from bringing these tools into the organization. But you don't even need IT to do it, which apologies to anyone from the IT function who might be on. But so many of the organizations that we speak to say, I'd love to make these changes, but I've got to go through IT to get these things installed. You don't. These tools are already in use. Facebook, Google Plus, LinkedIn. You don't need to work with IT to get there. I really like that one from Nick, work on the minority to convince the majority. Yeah, go to the champions, the evangelists, show that it works for them, and help win people over and win over middle managers as well, to Catherine's point. They're the people that will drive this change. It won't come from the top, so managers need to embrace this and show that they care about it.
Yeah, keep those thoughts coming, guys. It looks
absolutely. Creating a more personal experience, open badges, it would be great. And I think some members have pointed out the challenge of organizations need to get behind open badges. They need to be producing them to show that it actually works. And we think that will be a big change that we will see next year and beyond. So yeah, faster responses, more rapid tools, absolutely, lots of great stuff coming through there. I'll try and give you some thoughts to leave it, and as Don said, these slides will be shared. 10 things that we think can make these things real within organizations going into 2014 and beyond. Culture. You know, we can talk all day about technology and tools. Unless there's a culture that embraces them and supports them and actually makes them happen and allows them to happen, no change will come about. So you've got to establish a culture. It's everybody's job, of course. But for people in the learning professional part of the organization, creating, championing, connecting, those are the things that will establish culture. We don't want to control it. We let go and we let things happen, and we monitor what's working and we bring the right stuff to the top. Increasing empathy, I think, is incredibly important. And empathy might sound like a highfalutin word, but there's lots of simple things I think we can do. Simple things like diagnostics. It's incredible the amount of learning that gets produced that just has no regard for what I might have known before, where I am, what part of the organization I'm in, what I'm trying to get out of this, what my assessment of my own confidence or competence is. You don't need to do anything massively clever to create that. Just some simple questions at the start of any learning experience and some suggestions of content, I think, is a really, really quick win to drive up empathy. It shows the individual, recognize that you're not just a number, you're a person that comes with prior experience or a particular bias or focus, and we support you through that experience by targeting content that's relevant for you. And managers, as we said before, absolutely key in the empathy equation, making sure that they're following through, helping people to contextualize and action the learning and bring the experience forward. Letting Google lead, not falling too far behind. Personalizing results in the LMS if you must use an LMS or in other systems. And we're increasingly seeing organizations, they might have an LMS which they use for tracking data, so it becomes more of a training database where records and scores live, but it's not the place to go to for learning. So quite a few organizations we're speaking to are using things like SharePoint, which is much better for content because it's more of a content management system, all of this data around activity, tracking, seeing where people have gone, where they're going to next, lives much better in tools like SharePoint and Drupal and other CMSs than it does in the LMS. So the question about the LMS pushing back to becoming more of a training database is one I think that's on a lot of people's minds. If you can get a great LMS that has a good CMS element to it, we try to do that with our Tatara work so that both exist together, that's great. But if your LMS won't get you there, find a different way to do it. And offering meaningful suggestions, I think, just makes a massive change as well. So improving systems, so moving up that left-hand side of improving systems, but reducing the cost of delivering the technology. So looking at open source authoring tools like Adapt or Moodle or many of the other ones that are out there, spending on distribution as well as content. So recognizing not to blow the entire budget on creating the content, but so much work needs to go into marketing it, engaging people, letting people know it's there. I would argue we need to do as much of that as we do with content creation, is making sure that we're being good at marketing and advertising, something that within L&D teams we've not always been particularly strong at. We have this build it and they will come mentality. Well, they haven't come. We've got to do something to push out the content and make sure people are aware of what's available. Making assessment an experience, not an event. So thinking beyond the test, thinking about how do we make assessment continuous and multi-channel. And I mentioned this point earlier, active blogging and social participation as assessment. If you want people to care about this and if you want to change the culture, we've got to recognize and reward people who participate socially. So sharing content or +1ing it in Google or writing an intelligent response or engaging in a discussion forum or creating a short blog. I think those are all incredibly important tools for assessing competency and evidencing engagement in individuals. I would say far more relevant than did you score 80% on a one-off event-based test. That doesn't tell me much except your short-term working memory. What shows me that you are engaged and that you're actually a productive and engaged person is your output. So measuring your output, I think, becomes an incredibly important competency metric as we look into next year, and getting badges for showing that I am actually engaged and that I do develop content will become important. Following the money still remains incredibly important. Return on investment, we're all still hammered for evidencing return on investment. It will never go away. But it's not just about return on investment, it's return on engagement and return on activity as well. Looking at what Google Analytics or other tools can tell you about what content is being received, what people are taking up, that tells us a lot about what kind of job we're doing as a central team as well. Are we pushing the right types of content, and are we engaging people and getting responses at that level? engaging and empathizing with your line managers. They are your empathy agents, to coin a phrase. Are we looking after them enough? Are they the squeezed middle where we're just expecting them to absorb all of this and change the culture without taking care of them? And of course, line managers are learners too. Are we supporting them in these new mechanisms? Are we giving them the tools and the training to engage with people and drive to the culture change? We can't ever overlook that. These last two, I think they go together. Being a consultant, we hear this all the time, and it really came through very strongly in the research that we did. Nobody wants to be an order taker. Nobody wants to be perceived as being just transactionally affecting whatever has come in, because if we do that, all we'll do is more of the same, because or the organization buyers will come to us and say, you did a course last time, I want a course this time. And if all we're saying is, yes, we'll get right on that, nothing will change. So this quote came from one of the organizations. We need to move from being order takers, of doing more of the same, to saying, let's do it differently. So challenge people who come to us to try to procure a piece of content and say, does it really have to be a course? Can it be something else? Can it be a different experience? How can we create a more empathetic, more personalized experience? And I think this last point relates to that, is becoming authorities. You know, again, this is a phrase from someone. Design and delivery, these are increasingly commodities. Everybody can do them reasonably well. Expertise is what differentiates. Expertise and authority, showing that you really understand this stuff and that you have a social currency, and building your own brand, I think, as organizations and as individuals, and showing we're engaged with this. We care a lot about how we're ranked within the organization in terms of social authority and social signals. That's about being relentless, posting, blogging all the time, being pervasive, using all the channels available, and building that sense within an organization that there is a brand for learning that's not just about course-based output. But as someone makes the point there, you've got to reward people, thinking about how this feeds back into PDR and reward systems, but also the kudos that individuals get by being highly rated or having their content shared. I've observed that that means a lot to people, having that social currency. So encouraging that and allowing people to develop their own brand and their own individuality becomes incredibly important. So it's personalization, again, in two directions. Personalization experience for the learner, but also building personalization in how we produce content as well, and building our own reputations and brands and experiences. And those are the 10 trends that we've looked at. So I know a lot coming through, and I want to leave a few minutes for chat as well, but just to say thank you for bearing with me as I've gone through that. Great engagement, and really appreciate all of the discussion that's whipped through on the right-hand side. You can download the full report that sits behind this on our website, coneo.com/resources. You'll find the full report there. At Learning Technologies at the end of January, for those of you in the UK, you'll see us on stand 142 in our usual place. I mentioned earlier that insights can become currency, and I do literally mean currency here. We're running a competition at the moment in our e-learning professionals group on LinkedIn to win a free pass, a conference pass, which it's worth, Don will tell me, I think it's £1,000, £1,095. £1,000. So share your insight. Tell us what is the one thing that you are going to do or change in 2014, and the one that we think is most insightful and has the most social currency, you'll get a free pass to enable it to share and engage with each other and hear some great speakers. It's a fantastic conference, as always, that Don has curated for Learning Technology. So join the group, share a thought, win a pass. Jonathan says, get a job at City Guilds Kineo. Yeah, terms and conditions about employment following the insights are to be discussed, but who knows. So, Don, I'll hand back to you to maybe try and curate or crowdsource some thoughts from the discussion.
We have very little time left. I'm just going to put all this stuff into the resources thing. I've been compiling this resources thing. I think in the future we'll make this a regular thing. It does rather cover up what you've got there, Steve. I'm going to just make that a bit smaller. So you've got Steve's contact details at the bottom there. On the left-hand side, you've got all of the stuff that's been thrown into this during the. Oh, and Ashley's put the link in there, the link to the e-learning group, and that's better than one I put in, which is for some reason not being a link that's behaving itself. So I'm just going to drop that in there. What a fantastic presentation. Can I just say thank you very much to Stephen Walsh of City and Guilds Kineo, because I didn't think it was going to be possible to end the year on two really strong webinars. We've had such a great series of webinars this year, but we had 126 people staying with you throughout, Stephen, which has to mean that there was a lot of value that everyone got out of that. I certainly did. so everyone, I'm trying to say thank you for your input in this and what you were sharing and some of the resources I put up there. I have to say thank you to Stephen Walsh. That wasn't the regular, oh, this is what's going to be big next year. That was really insightful. That was a lot of good thinking that we're going to go away and stew over and think about. I would recommend having a look at these resources on the left-hand side, in particular the one where you join the LinkedIn group and also where you go and have a look at the insights report there. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that is copied into the archive, which will go onto the Learning and Skills group. As always, the place to get the follow-up information is learningandskillsgroup.com. And I'm going to put the deck for this and for our 10 o'clock webinar up now, so it'll be live by 2 o'clock this afternoon. And then we'll have the recordings up by Monday of next week. We had a couple of festive links in as well. So the last 2 links here on there. If you're winding down a bit and you want to have a bit of fun, there are 2 links at the bottom of this resources page, which are actually quite funny. So you might want to go and have a look at those. What, as Jonathan Vernon says, a wonderful finale to the year it's been. I'm not sure we've got time for any questions, but well, we've got 4 minutes, so I'm going to go to my questions list and fish one out.
Yep.
Noise or content? This was something that just towards the end of what you were saying there, Stephen. If people are going to be given kudos, points, or something for creating, for blogging, for retweeting, how does that, on the one hand, affect people who prefer to learn by lurking and absorbing and reflecting rather than producing? And also, isn't there a risk of stuff being created which is, as Chris said, more noise than signal? A lot of talk about it, but not actually much that is of any value. Just a quick thought about that.
Yeah, I suppose the point about lurkers rather than consumers, and we don't expect that everybody will do this. And I think there's there are ratios that show that the producers are in the minority in most of this, and I think that's fine. We're not trying to turn everyone into bloggers or active social engagers. I just think it gives them another channel for consuming content. I think the noise versus signal, that's a risk. If your Twitter feed is anything like mine, it's very hard to ascertain what's noise versus genuine signals and genuine relevant content. I think that the tools that help us with that, I go back to all the social signals about what's being liked, what's being shared. I really do believe the right content will rise to the top because people will create a sense of what's relevant and what's authoritative within the organization by sharing and engaging with the people who are actually writing great content. So, I think we have to believe in the power of the free market and enabling the right content to rise to the surface as long as people are actively signaling what's relevant and what's not. Mm-hmm. I think it becomes far more relevant than using the featured course within the LMS, which is an arbitrary, centrally determined way of driving authority. Much better to drive that through likes and what people are actually interested in.
Yes, I don't believe economically that the power of the unfettered free market always works, but of course in the social field, the free market is controlled by, especially if things are not anonymous, by people's wish to maintain some sense of their own profile online. And my experience working across a number of communities for a number of years is that actually, as long as you've got people not being anonymous, people will tend to play down their expertise rather than overplay it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because people don't want to be thought to be overdoing it. Yep. Order and chaos. Just one last point, and then we'll have to wrap up. For the year, I can't believe I'm saying it. Order and chaos.
Yeah.
Jonathan, Marco, Ashley, Cedric, Pat, a lot of people pointed out the fact that if things are too chaotic, we're doing too much. Sorry, there's some background noise there. Could we just keep quiet if you're dialed in? That'd be great. Last question then. If there's too much stuff that's social, if we drift too far that way, what do we do about stuff that people have to know whether they like it or not?
Yeah, I think
webinar on like the trends for 2014.
I think that's Barbara Thompson.
Got someone there unmuted there.
Interesting stuff. Looking at Google Analytics and things like that.
Barbara, I think you're probably unconsciously sharing your social list.
Go on, very quickly.
It's a fair point. I don't want to be naive about the fact that there are still must-dos. Of course, there are. A lot of what we do is, there's compliance, sales, leadership, product knowledge. Those things will need some element of formality because they're must-do, there's regulatory needs. Allowing a social answer to those questions is high risk. So I don't think that element will go away. I think what the social content does for us is it enables us to crowdsource great insights to make sure that that more formal element is kept relevant and kept up to date. So I think if we do it right, there's potentially a virtual circle there where you may create something that's more formal, more course-based because we have to, and that's the mechanism available to us at the moment. But it doesn't have to stand still. It can evolve and it can respond to what learners' insights and interests are as well. So there is a need for a certain amount of order. I totally accept that. I think its primacy will change. It may not be in 2014, but the scales are shifting over time.
I think that's the point. The question of primacy. What's the most important thing? And I think right now, led by people like Charles, and we're delighted to have him on the call, is a shift away from the primacy of the formal delivery mechanism. But that does not mean, of course, that it's dead, or indeed possibly that it will ever die.
Or that it needs to work on its own. It can still be there, but it doesn't become the only source of information.
Exactly. My goodness, I can't believe that we've had such a good webinar to finish the year with. It's 1 o'clock in the UK, 1 o'clock in Dublin too. If you've enjoyed it, and our anonymous caller definitely said she'd enjoyed it and found it interesting, hash LSG Webinar. Tell the world about it on Twitter, and by all means, I think it's an excellent idea to go and see City and Guilds Kineo at the Learning Technologies Conference. To find out more about the conference, well, sorry, first of all, we've got all the materials will be available. I'm going to get the decks up in the next couple of hours, and then the recording should be live